Boom! We're back with another episode with Sage Ramble TV, episode 15, I think, Chance. And we have Hunter, the networking dog, the guy between 2020 to 2021. We're dominating comment sections. Sorry, I don't have an introduction for you, so maybe you can put in 2 cents.
I love it. Yeah, just super humbled to be here with the two of you guys. Like I said, I've seen other people that you've had on the calls, and so even lucky that you'd even reach out to a guy like me. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man, of course.
Excited to
And
have you, brother.
But yeah, today I wanted to speak to you about, everyday people transitioning to remote high ticket sales and just around the networking raw overall. But if you can maybe share a little bit of like your background, how you got into sales yourself and how you lean towards now being the networking god within our inner circle that we have.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, my start was a bit not traditional. Like I wasn't just always in sales, and obviously I want to keep my story pretty short here, not to take away from anything else. But I've been in sales for about 7 years, and I jumped through a variety of different industries. And so I had done like some teaching jobs and had worked as a server. And I had a friend that was in sales that was like, "Hey, you should like look into sales. Like, I think you're likable and can communicate well. Like maybe it'd be something that'd be good." I'm like, salespeople are sleazy. I don't think I'd ever be interested in getting into that. And yeah, I was like, you know what, maybe I'll look into it, and kind of went in with a little bit more open mind. And I think I got a similar start to Chance, and I worked selling AT&T, selling internet,
Ah,
cell phones, TVs, other things like that. And so that's where I really got my start, and learned to love it a lot, learning about persuasion, communication, tonality, asking questions, being able to overcome objections, different things like that was just all so thrilling to me. It was a whole new game that opened up. And so from that, I just jumped from different niches, areas that interest me, that would help me level up, get to the next level. And then around 2020, just around COVID, like I said, I came across meeting JD and got really interested in just being able to help people find and land jobs. And so I started diving and studying more deeply into that. And it's been an absolute, it wasn't something that I'd ever expected, being like, oh, this is something I'd really like, and being able to teach people strategies on how to be able to find and land jobs, being able to network and things like that. But it's been an absolute dream. And so now working with the Undeniable Closer, it's been absolutely awesome. And so I still have a long way to go, still have a lot to learn. I still feel like I'm in a unrefined state with what I teach about networking, but always looking to level up, and has had some good success so far, and hopefully can keep producing more.
man, I've been meaning to ask you for the year and 3 months that I've known you. How long did you close for?
So I had closed for that like entire 6 years. Like I was never a setter. I never did any setting. I like jumped right into closing, and then just forever after just only basically did that. So even setting is a realm that I feel like I understand on fundamental and feel like I could have done really well at, but something that I didn't really try my hand at too much. But yeah, basically was closing the entire time.
That's awesome, dude. I love it. You took the hunter approach, man. It's what you tell people. You don't have to start out as a setter, right?
Yeah, that's how I feel. And obviously, like I feel like you said, it's possible, especially if you're willing to put the work in, the changes. Like I know that those opportunities can be open up to you. And I don't think it's a matter of luck. I think there were some things I was bringing to the table. I felt like because I came from a background of a teacher, I knew how to ask questions really well, and guide a conversation and help people come to realizations and understanding. And so I think that was a huge edge for me, being able to get into the closing space. Whereas like with setting, obviously that's involved too, but it allowed me to skip that over that part and feel like they felt like they could trust me on leads coming in, and me basically being able to close them. So
That's great, man. I love it. I love it. I agree with both sides. We've had a debate on here about that. So
Yeah, we had a conversation, I think maybe a month back. I think it's already a month. We had a little bit of controversial topic. Should you start as a setter or should you start as a closer? Obviously, Chance and I did start as a setter and then worked our ways up, but we never really had someone on here that just went straight to closing. So that's an interesting approach. But I have a question for you as we are sitting here. when you got into like closing, high tier closing, um, did you have an idea beforehand of what you were actually doing when you were networking? Because as I understand with the AD, you were the one who initially started taking action and do the career development networking route before anyone else in this industry.
Yeah, for me, I think it was something I was doing instinctually at the start, and it wasn't something I was doing intentionally. And then until I caught on to the idea, like, I think there's a bit of a process here, right? Then I started to kind of dive into like, how can I break this down into steps? How can I repeat this again and again? How can I teach it to others? And so that then it can be reproduced again. And so that was basically how it started. So what the big idea was, is I realized, you know what, there's a lot I don't know about this industry that I'm interested in. And basically how I kind of got my start is when my friend was like, hey, maybe you should look into sales. So I was like, oh, okay. And so then I kind of started applying to jobs. I applied to 532 job posts for sales.
532?
Yeah. So this was 6 years ago, and decline. Like, I didn't even get a response back. And I realized like my resume just wasn't very good. I realized, I was like, you know what? I'm not what they're looking for on paper, but if they got to meet me as a person, I feel like that would be a different discussion and a different, kind of opening there. And so then what I started to do is I started to just kind of connect people and just trying to like introduce myself as a person, just to be able to talk with them. And so I kind of reached out and said, hey, I saw there was a job opening here. I was really interested in looking into it. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about it, just because it was something I'm maybe interested in looking into. Maybe you can help me with your expertise. And then people were like, yeah, sure, absolutely. I'd be like more than happy to help. And so then I started all these conversations. And then after going through this application process for like weeks, no response, within about 2 weeks, I had interviews and I had 8 job offers at my disposal, like right out the gate. And so then I was kind of like, man, I don't think I'm ever going to try to do this resume thing again. So then I basically, whenever I moved to a new place or I wanted a new opportunity or I was looking to a new realm, I was kind of like, who can I talk to that can learn a little bit more about this and give me some insight? And basically move forward there. So that's basically how it kind of started. It was very instinctual, just because I was like, this whole resume process is so dumb, right? And then basically it was later on like, hey, I think I could break this down into a process and teach it to other people. So that's kind of how I got it started and move forward with that.
Bro, I feel you. I don't like resumes, and I feel for the people that have to read through hundreds of them. Like, that would be so boring, dude.
They don't even do it anymore, right? They have this applicant training or applicant tracking software. It's called ATS that just scans them. And basically they input certain things that determine what's a good resume and a bad resume. And it throws most of them in.
Really cool.
And then
that's really cool.
For the business owners, it's awesome, right? For the applicants, it sucks. It's,
yeah.
It's so bad, right? But I think I just read a statistic recently that hiring people takes 6 seconds to look at a resume. So they're not even, I don't know how much you can read in 6 seconds, but I mean, unless you're like a savant, but I don't think they're even reading that much either, So I feel like it doesn't even bode well to even play the game. And I think they're on the decline. I think they're going to die soon, but we'll see where that comes.
Yeah, I actually posted a job on LinkedIn for an SDR. And LinkedIn has a very similar structure to if you had a professional Instagram chat before. It's like the primary, it's the general, it's the message request, and then there's the trash box in message request. It's the same with LinkedIn. I had the primary list that filters through with the tracking system, and then I found another filter. It was like 54, and then I was like, where did all these come from? Right? I didn't even know that page existed. So I guess like that's the tracking system that you were referring to.
Yep. It's crazy. And I don't obviously want to go too deep into it, but yeah, it's super detrimental to the applicants, the job seekers nowadays. And so playing into the applicant tracking system is really difficult. It's hard to beat.
Yeah. Did you ever, before joining sales experience, with the applying to jobs, like just being declined for jobs left and right, applying, like where you were a teacher, a server, was that ever happening? Like,
Yeah, great question. So even with those jobs, I had people I knew that referred me and basically got me in to those different opportunities. And so even then I wasn't even, because I didn't really have much of a resume. Like the first times that I kind of applied to resume was I was living in Northern California. I was 17 going on 18. I just graduated high school. I was like part of that younger group. And so I still had like a couple months after I graduated before I turned 18. And so I applied to work at like Nike. I applied to work at like a juice shop, different places just to be able to work over the summer, and kind of save up some money. And even from then, like totally got declined and shut down. But like the day I turned 18, I got some calls and they were like, hey, we saw that you just turned 18. We'd be happy to hire. So there were some hiring laws that were in the way too. But yeah, something that they weren't even worth entertaining even. So kind of interesting.
yeah. So you kind of went through the process of being referred to jobs very, very early on.
Yeah.
I guess like moving on to more towards the high ticket sales spectrum, um, there is a really hot topic that I wanted to go through about, which is something that you preaches, JD preaches, which is the transition when it comes to remote high ticket sales. Also with the networking, career development, all of that stuff. Like, what would be your advice to someone who is working a 9 to 5, commuting to a job with the traveling left and right, maybe taking care of, other responsibilities, the house, the family, all of that stuff. How would someone best, and maybe this is too broad of a question, but how would someone best kind of make that transition from their 9 to 5 to a more remote based job?
Yeah. Great question. That's awesome. So one thing that I want to be able to encourage, like you said, for a lot of people, especially that are wanting to transition in, is they can't believe what they see. And I know that's really difficult for a lot of people, right? Because everyone likes evidence, they like proof, all these things. But typically what happens when people go about transitioning is they'll go towards looking for job posts, right? So, hey, if I want to get hired in sales, I'm going to go look at job posts, right? And so what'll happen is they'll look at job posts and the job post will say, we need X amount of years requirement. We need this much revenue generated. We need you to work these specific hours. And what's going to happen is you're going to feed the belief that, oh man, well, I'm working a 9 to 5. I can't just transition out and take like a Hail Mary. I have my own life and family or whatever situation to take care of. I don't have that experience. I don't have this revenue generated. It's not going to be possible for me to transition. And so what people will do is then they'll have this position of where they're like longing for it and not. And what the reality is that job posts only account for about 30% of the opportunities that are out there. 70% of opportunities aren't posted publicly. So if you go about meeting the right people and having these discussions and kind of talking with them of like, hey, look, like I'm looking to transition into here. Here's what I'm able to basically commit to. Is that something that you would even be open to as a possibility before I can commit to you full time and being able to do this? And then what you do is you create opportunities for yourself that's going to fit in your current schedule with your current past experience that is going to allow you to do well and then transition when you have basically proof of concept. So for me, the biggest thing that I want to encourage people is you can't believe what you see. You just can't do it, because what's going to happen is that the proof that you see on job posts is just going to be down that, hey, this is not a possibility. It's never going to work for you unless you send a Hail Mary. And that seems really scary, And so people won't even want to venture out. So that's what I basically recommend is like, hey, go talk with people, ask like, hey, having these conversations and seeing what's open and available, to you.
Yeah, it's like it's like betting the carrot. Uh, it sounds a bit sus, but it's like betting the carrot. It's like someone who's asking for at least 2 years of sales experience, right? You're able to pull out with, well, what if someone has a year of experience, but they have done really, really well?
Really?
Yeah, I would be considered that person. What if 6 months and you keep going down, right, to zero by having the traits, and they say like, all right, I mean, we have a system, so we can plug you in, right? Because you're a trustworthy person. It's like goes down, goes down, goes down. So it's uh, going in alignment to what you're saying. But when it comes to, because we want to start, creating these connections. Where is a good way to start, I guess, like reaching out to people like that? Because I know a lot of people are you know, especially offline, meeting people face to face is more of like a common handshake kind of thing, just chatting. But
Well,
online, it's like, hey, I'm sending this person a message. I know how this person will react, and we keep thinking too much about it. But how does someone just get in the trenches?
yeah, great question. So just to share a little background story. So one of my times working as I worked as a server. And so what I was always trying to think about is like, okay, how do I get bigger tips? Right. And so for a lot of people, if you ask is like, okay, like how do you get bigger tips? People are going to say like, give better service, you know, get their order right, all of this stuff. Right. And for me, I never viewed that's how I got bigger tips. That's how I didn't lose the tip that was basically preset. Right. So like what they do is that if you made mistakes, they would take away your tip. What I realize is that the way to increase your tips for serving is to appeal to people's generosity. People will give more tips if they feel generous towards you. So some things I did is like, obviously I wanted to make sure I did all the good things, right? Like I provided good service, but when they would try and like chat and conversation, you know, and have conversations with me, I would try and weave in different aspects about my life that would appeal to their generosity. So like one thing is I was serving as I was preparing to get married. And so they kind of talk with me and they're like, hey, like what are you looking forward to? I was like, oh man, I have some wedding plans. I'm trying to save up for my honeymoon. I'm trying to do this. And people are like, oh my gosh, right. That's like, you know, that's awesome. And then I ended up getting these like massive tips because of my story, right? And so when people start outreaching and you're wanting to basically transition into sales, appeal to these people's generosity. Hey, I really like the content you've been putting out. Be really complimentary, right? I don't want to say like butter them up because that sounds authentic, but be genuine, like genuinely compliment them. Just say like, hey, I really like what you're doing. I've been following you for a little while. I'm actually looking to transition into sales. I'm fairly new to it, but I feel like it would be something I'd be good at, right? As I learned a little bit more about it. Would you be open to answering a couple of questions for me to help me know what actions I need to take and where I can put my efforts in order to break into the industry, right? And people, what they're going to do
That's
is
so good.
they're going to hear your story and they're going to see themselves in you. And they're going to be like, you know what? I was in a similar position before. I realize all the hardships that came with that. And I'm in a position I can help. I'm going to offer that help, right? And so I feel like when you're going about outreach and you're talking with people, is your main mode of focus should be appealing to people's generosity, right? Because they're more willing to help you and they're willing to answer questions. Now, if you go into a position where you're not appealing to people's generosity in the sense of like, hey, can you give me a job or point me to somewhere where there's a job, you're only looking to take, right? People are less genuine to help, right? Like they just don't. Like I don't know. I don't know all the psychology into it. Like maybe I should look a little bit deeper into it. But like I really feel like this is part of like the psychology that I've experienced is that when I'd go up demanding of things that I wanted, I never got it. So imagine if I went up as a server and said, hey, can you give me a bigger tip? Like I think I'd get less, right? But when I appeal to people's generosity and who they are, and I'm complimentary and I share them my story, people were more open to being able to help them out because I think there's another aspect that kind of goes into this that people love the underdogs. They like helping the underdogs in helping accomplish their goals. So I feel like that's something that would be huge for people to start. If they just did that, I think they would have so many doors open just by following that idea alone.
Yeah, that was a whole bunch of nuggets. If man, I really wish that's the viewers are listening throughout the entire thing because that was a whole bunch of nuggets to really consume. Chance, I got a bunch of freaking questions, man, but I've been talking for a while, so I'll leave it over to you.
Yeah, man. Basically, I was just going to say, it almost sounds like Hunter listened to my presentation on how I made 10K in my first month closing, the slide about networking. And by that, I mean, it kind of sounds like I just copied and pasted what Hunter preaches. So that's literally what I said. I made a free presentation, like 5 minutes long, on
It.
3 steps to making 10K in your first month closing and how I did it. One of them was networking. I was really quick because David's putting something together on that. But I literally said the same principles that you did, right? Someone's not going to refer you to an opportunity if their first impression of you was you demanding an opportunity.
For sure.
I preach value in, value out. It's very similar to what you said, right?
Yeah.
The more value we give them when it comes time to give value back, you're going to be atop of the list. right? And you're like, oh, hey, I remember David. He gave me this piece of advice and this, and he complimented this, and he asked these questions. I've got an opportunity. Do you know anybody? Right? And it's yeah, it's crazy, man. It just shows that I actually soaked up what you teach. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I'm sure you had that even before I talked about it. And it's not even something that's like mine either, right? Like I think these are principles that have just existed throughout time. And there's just so many different ways to apply them. So I think your take on it's awesome. And just to be able to like add on that, like I know for a lot of people, and I felt this at the beginning, is like, man, what can I give to people? You know what I mean? Like what can I give to them? And especially when I was starting out, like I felt like I didn't have much, whatever it was, right? Like what advice? I don't know. And so for me, I realized that giving people a space to share their expertise and knowledge with me was value enough. Like people love sharing what they know. Like this is why we're here together. This is why I said yes. I like sharing what I know, right? And so being able to be on here is super valuable to me, right? Just because I'm able to talk about my story, about things that I've learned that I feel like can help others. And so even when you're networking, giving people a space to give you advice and to learn from their expertise and kind of just, for me, I viewed it as like being at their feet, right? And just being able to just be really humble and gracious to learn from them is so valuable to people that people enjoy it a lot.
No, I completely agree, man. And it's almost along the same philosophy as I do this a lot on my closing calls. I will ask the prospect, do me a favor, and people want to help people who help people, right? It's just a basic philosophy, right? And even setting up my own closing calls now, it's a line that I use. Do me a favor and watch this video before we get on. People watch it. They're like, I did you a favor.
Yeah,
it's true, bro. People want to help people.
Where's my price?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, great point. Yeah, great points. I totally, like I said, I obviously agree, right? And so I like those points that you brought up. I think that's awesome.
Boom. I think a good way to kind of wrap this all up is because I have a question that I've been wondering for quite a while, and I've been pondering on this for a moment. And that is, and we can discuss that between us three, but that is, what are the like top 3 traits that these 7-8 figure companies are looking for within people or the sales people that they hire?
Yeah, great question. Great question. So for me, in my opinion, I think there's so many traits that are out there, and even some companies, I think this is why it's important to do research before you reach out to companies. You'll see in their messaging and how they talk about it what specific characteristics that they value specifically, right? In salespeople, I think we can make some generalities. I think number one, I think competitiveness is a huge one, right? And not in the sense of like, hey, I'm going to beat everyone down, but just this idea of like drive, that they're driven to improve, to be better, to compete, to perform, right? And to basically move forward. I think being competitive is a huge one. And I want to do it in the one of like, hey, I don't want to tear other people down, but they're competing with themselves, right? And they're moving forward. I think that's a huge inspiration. They're always looking to level up and improve. And I think that's a really extremely powerful one. I think the next one, I think being able to be driven and, like I said, work hard. I think that's another big one. Because what's nice is that if you see someone that's working hard and putting the time and effort, there's moldable clay there that can be shaped and adjusted and improved. But the people who are, maybe they'll work hard a little bit and then drop off, it's inconsistent and it makes it hard to basically move forward there. So I think competitiveness, I think hardworking there, and I think some emotional intelligence is so massive. I think for me early on, even though like my skills were pretty unrefined, I felt like I was observant of people and their emotions. And so being able to talk about that and kind of tune into that, I think was helpful as well. So being able to have this ability to empathize, sympathize, understand people emotionally, I think those are some general characteristics that I feel like I've seen and that people bought into basically me, that's allowed me to move forward in some opportunities.
Damn, I didn't even think of the emotional intelligence one. But that's a big one. That's a big one. I mean, it kind of developed over time for me as I started, struggling at sales and just, keep putting more hours in, and then you kind of like learn through the hardships. But yeah, I definitely didn't have the emotional intelligence my first ever month. Definitely can admit that.
Yeah. And it's something that it isn't taught on a wide scale. It's almost like expected, especially if you go through sales training and stuff. Really, what they'll talk about is like, hey, what to say, how to say it, right? But getting into being able to really understand and tune in and see how people are responding and the emotions that they have, that you can pick up on what they're saying, how they're saying it, and the effect of those things, really being able to tune into that a lot. And what that's going to do is that's how you're really truly listening, is not just hearing what they say, but how they're saying it, why they're saying it, in what basically order, can give you a lot into the emotion behind it, that then gives you so much more on what to say and where to go from there. Because when you hear how people talk about things, right, you can get a greater sense. And what that's going to do is it's only going to be able to maximize the sales training that you have if you can tune into that. But for a lot of people, the basis is like, here's what they're going to say, this is what you say, and then we can kind of go from there, and we hope that it picks up the emotion, right? But being able to work on developing that is super huge. It's helped me a lot in my marriage too. So if you're wanting to get married, you want to have that special someone, having some emotional intelligence is going to help a lot. I promise. It's
That's
not
the
just
next course. Get married, get better at sales. Only for $197 with Hunter Alice.
I completely agree, Hunter. And that's why I'm a firm believer of the first 5 to 10 minutes of the call being the most important, because you should model the rest of the call after what you literally just said. How your questions are landing, how the prospects talk about themselves, how they answer the questions, how deep they go with their answers, right? Because that should help you determine what questions, when, and how you're going to say things and respond moving forward in the call, right? Because I'm not going to treat somebody who is super excited to be on the call the same way I'm going to treat somebody that gets off like standoffish, right?
For sure.
Or somebody who goes on a 20-minute in the weeds ramble of one answer. I'm not going to treat them the same as somebody that says, I'm just here for more money.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
100%. Yep.
Nah, you hit it right on the head, man. I love it.
Yeah, just being able to have that flexibility is just huge, because what we need to realize is just everyone's different, everyone has their own story, their background, how they feel and believe about things. And so being able to kind of get in that same rhythm, right? Like just being able to kind of flow with them takes a level of that emotional intelligence that's going to allow you to do that. And then once you pair that with the sales skills, man, the sales skills just go through the absolute roof, right? Like when you can do that.
Yep. I think that's a good ending. Elon Musk will call you and your sales skills will go to the moon. But yeah, we'll wrap it up from here. I think this was a great episode. Man, we gotta do a Hunter part 2.
Bro, yeah, I feel like we just got on, dude. What's going on? It's only been 30 minutes. I'm like, what the fuck? I feel like it's been 10 minutes, bro.
Been like 35 minutes. It's like, man. All right, man. We gotta have a part 2, definitely.
Oh, absolutely.
But
I got more questions that I want to ask you, Hunter. It was you had a bunch of great points, but we're trying to keep these kind of under 45 minutes. So
yeah.
We got a habit of rambling, as you can tell by the title, so.
We're trying
I thought this was sales ramble. I was like, I was ready to go,
We gotta keep us centered, keep us sane, right? I mean, spare our energy to the next week's one. But I'm gonna put Hunter's links in the chat if anyone want to connect with Hunter. But he responds, he's helpful, he's there for you. And if you want to transition into remote high-ticket sales, he's the person I would talk about, and you should too. And if you want to have chances, sales presentation resource, whatever that's called, DM me the word sales or chance, and we'll send it over right away. But that's pretty much it. Another boom, and